Good morning. Welcome to this session on SME performance and competitiveness review. My name is Outi Slotboom. I am director at the European Commission. I will be moderating the session with our distinguished panel here. This is a very good panel for me to start the workshop sessions at this year's assembly. This is really the panel that looks at data, looks at service. What do we know of companies? What do we know of the challenges they face? What do we know of how companies themselves see the outlook? It is useful to share this information with enterprises themselves because they know how their markets will look like. And it is very important for us and for national, regional, local policy makers to first have a good picture of where we stand and then design their policies to answer to the challenges as they come out of data and service. We have in this panel on my right Ludger Odenthal from our team in the Commission. Ludger is team leader for SME policy analysis. Then in the middle, Giacomo Fersini, who is a senior economic policy advisor at Eurochambers in Brussels. And then we have Brian Mikkelsen, the CEO of the Danish Chamber of Commerce. They will all have studies or analysis service to present. Ludger will show to us what this year's SME performance review of the European Commission says of small and medium-sized businesses in the EU. Then Giacomo will share with us the economic survey of Eurochambers, which has not been published yet. So you really get a preview and it will be published right after he has told you what it contains. So a real curtain raiser. And then Brian will show to us the competitiveness barometer which the Danish Chamber of Commerce has produced, which also looks at other countries than Denmark, so it's certainly of wide interest here. We will start with the initial presentations, then there will be a questions and answer session. The questions and answers session will have to be a bit shorter than planned. We got extra time to go until 11:05. You can ask for the microphone in the room once we get to the questions and answers session, and those following online can write questions via the Slido, and you will, at least at that point, see the Slido QR code on the screen. So with that, I would ask Ludger to start.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see that so many people found the way here into the room. So, I will kick off the session by giving you some sort of key insights from our annual report on SMEs. This is the flagship report we bring out every year, the European Commission analyzing the state of European SMEs. And I think I can start with basically a set of, let me see the slides.
We need also to see it on the screen here.
Yes. So, I think I can, we can't see it here in front of the screen. But anyway, so I think I can start with a bit of good news, and that is that SMEs have gone in the last couple of years, like all businesses, through a really tough time with all the challenges, and I don't have to repeat them, but we see really in the last 3 or 4 years, in particular now in 25, the latest year, we forecasted a really overall a positive trend, not across the board, but you see up there that all size classes have seen positive growth, and in particular, what's particularly interesting is that we see a particular dynamic with micro firms, meaning firms with less than 10 firms. That is a very interesting development, rather unusual, because traditionally they tend to lag larger firms, but in the last years we see a particular dynamism there. We can have in the Q&A, we can maybe discuss a bit the reason why this is the case. There's not one single reason, but it's interesting because they represent 92% of all businesses in Europe, and if that segment grows with, roughly like 1 to 2% in terms of employment value added, that per se is good news. Of course, it would be nice. If the small and mid-size would follow suit, but it seems also in the latest figure that there's also a positive trend here. So overall, I think we are cautiously optimistic going into 25 and then also going into 26 that there is a growth overall with the sector. And in the discussion, we can talk about industries and countries, of course, in detail. Now, what keeps SMEs back in terms of, not sort of expanding further? Well, there are two factors that have been particularly strong in recent years, and this is one is high costs, and here this is particularly the factor of energy that is well known, and it's also the shortage of skilled labor that is now a problem across Europe, no longer confined to individual member states, and that is a serious problem now also for business expanding, even through more challenging time. It's mentioned, it's right up here as a big problem. And then, of course, we see an uptick also in regulation and administrative burden in between 23, 24 as a real problem for small businesses. And that is, of course, an issue that has been already addressed yesterday and this morning already as a serious issue. I want to close out my presentation to also zoom in quickly to a particular interesting segment of our 26 million SMEs, and these are scale-up firms, and those are firms that we define them that grow at least with 10% per year on average, at least 3 years in terms of employment and value added. And we did our report features a special analysis of this particular segment. If you're talking about scalers, a lot of people have immediately the intuition and think about high-tech firms, deep tech firms, and so on. But if you look at it detail, you see most scalers, fast-growing firms, you find actually in traditional sectors, and you can see that it's really this growth potential is spread across the economy and also across different levels of innovation. So it is possible to grow fast and expand your business even if you're not on the cutting edge of technology. I think that's interesting finding that comes from a Eurobarometer that we carried out, but also with the long-standing work that we do with the OECD on analyzing microdata, on looking at really what individual firms' data. So that's interesting. And from that data, we can also see, yes, among young firms, you are more likely to see scale-ups, but in general, in absolute terms, the majority of firms that grow fast are actually older firms. Yeah? So because also, of course, they represent the majority of firms. But that's also something interesting, I think, to keep in mind. Again, there is probably a bit of a stereotype of scaling as a young firm and a high-tech firm. But, that they exist. But I think the point we are making is there are far more firms out there that grow fast, grow dynamically, and change and transform, that do not fit into that stereotype and that deserve our attention. And then, of course, there's a geographic distribution. You have scalers in particular, of course, in metropolitan areas, but in particular when it comes to traditional industries, so to speak, not just the sort of IT industries. You find them also outside the urban centers, and they have their in particular important contribution. Finally, in terms of job creation, we've seen that these scalers, SME scalers, outweigh in importance far more than the large firms in job creation. So for any 10 jobs lately that large firms created, these scaling SMEs create 16. So that underlines their experience. And I want to close on a positive note saying, yes, there's a lot of work to be done, and there is a lot of challenges for European businesses. But I think what this shows that also there is growth potential in Europe. It's happening. And so it's not the question whether scaling is possible at all in Europe, but it's more how can we get more of these businesses grow. That is certainly the task for policymakers. Thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ludger. Maybe already, since you were very disciplined with time, allow me already to ask you to answer in 2 or 3 sentences after the positive things you presented. Why would today be a good time to start a company in the EU? There's 1 or 2 sentences.
Well, because I think there is enormous new potential in these new technologies. That in particular, there is evidence that artificial intelligence has enormous potential, not just for the large firms, but in particular also for smaller firms. And there is some evidence in that. I come to come back to the point why the small segment is growing, that in a way, there seems to be at least some AI solution are at least now faster to adopt for smaller firms and to help them multiply their potential as in larger corporations. So I think in particular in terms of technology, there is a lot that firms across the board can do to boost their productivity. So I think that's certainly something exciting.
Thank you very much. I will also address the same question to the other 2 speakers, but now, Giacomo, we move to you and your economic survey.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today, and thanks, Uti. Indeed, my idea today is to present you the findings of our annual economic survey. Well, this year is a different year compared to previous editions, because we see that there is a certain, as Ludger already mentioned, cautious optimism across businesses. And just to give you an idea of how the survey works, so basically we coordinate the survey, but we implement it together with our national chambers of commerce. And overall, we gathered this year over 40,000 replies from 28 countries. What we ask our entrepreneurs is whether they expect an increase, a decrease, or constant levels of domestic sales, export sales, employment, and other indicators, as well as what challenges they expect in 2026. So Ludger gave an overview of what the results were for 2025, and now let's have a look at what 2026 looks like. As already Ludger said, the overall results suggest a weak but broad-based improvement in the business sentiment. And as I said, the expectations are less negative compared to 2025. And this, as already said, comes after very challenging years for companies where policy conditions, both at the macro level but also the micro level, were particularly challenging and not very favorable for SMEs. At the macro level, you had high inflation. If you remember, in 2022, we were talking about 9.2% of inflation. And for 2026, I believe it will go down to 1.7%, which is a good news already. Then at the micro level, also companies are facing labor costs, high energy bills, also house renting. So these all operational costs are adding a lot of pressures on companies. So going very quickly into the results, national sales continue to be very resilient. If you look at the previous editions, indeed, we see that overall they remain positive. They are expected to remain positive for 2026. And this is, as already mentioned, an effect of the easing of inflation together with a moderate decline in consumer prices, which, as you can imagine, is showing some positive results. So the real wage growth that European households have experienced in the past few months is somehow giving to restoring the confidence, the consumer confidence, and therefore supporting the domestic sales in Europe. I will be very brief and move directly to the next index, which is export sales. So here we ask our entrepreneurs whether they expect an increase, a decrease, or constant level for 2026 in export. As you see, the results is not as encouraging as the national sales for several reasons. For instance, this year, in 2025, you had the first part of the year, which was very interesting because there was an increase in export, mostly due to front-loading export. As you can imagine, there was a very strong turbulence in the EU linked to the trade uncertainty. But of course, in the second part of the year, this faded away because EU and US reached a trade deal during summer. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind that the respondents to these surveys are not necessarily companies that export internationally. So they also export, they mostly export in the single market. And that somehow also underscores one fact, in my opinion, that there are some challenges, some barriers within the single market that we should look into. Looking at employment levels are also expected to perform quite bad compared to if you look at the previous years. The result is way below the 10-year average. And of course, this is mostly due to the fact that entrepreneurs at the moment are preferring to retain the workforce. They are not looking into hiring new employees, mostly because of the high cost of hiring new employees. We have the wage increase, as I said, the social security expenses, which are particularly important when it comes to business labor costs. But I will get back to this later with the challenges. Moving into the investment levels, these results somehow reflects very similar expectations compared to export levels. They are not particularly bright. Yeah, this is the result is still below the 10-year average, and as I said, the high energy cost somehow is leading businesses to consider more the replacement of current machineries to improve efficiency, for instance, instead of investing into totally different technologies or even opening a new factory in another country and so on. So investment are kept on hold for 2026. And then we look at the business confidence. Business confidence, which is a bit of a summary of all these indicators because it encompasses all the capacity of a company to export, to sell nationally, to invest, and so on. And as you see, also in this case, expectations are not particularly bright, but they are definitely better than last year. And these results are very much in line with some findings of the Commission Economic Sentiment Indicator, but also the OECD Business Confidence Index, which are pointing at similar directions. And yeah, as I said, we should indeed try to keep this momentum up. You see that there is an upward trajectory, which indeed it's important to strengthen over the next year and months and years. So business confidence is the overall index, but then what should we do to improve this trajectory, to keep it up? So for sure, we should have a look at what challenges companies will expect for 2026 and try to address those. So in this last slide, you see what are the results from our survey. And I wanted also to give you an idea of the results that we registered in the past 2 years with the yellow and the orange dots. And labor costs is not a news because, you know, high energy costs are definitely impacting companies. And as I said already, the costs associated to employing new employees, but also wage increases are definitely contributing to to the performance of this challenge. The most interesting result, in my opinion, is the regulatory burden, which you see as a second. And this was a challenge that we introduced in our survey just 4 years ago. And as you see, over years, it gained strong relevance. 2 years ago, it was the fourth one. Then last year it became third, and well, this year it became second. So this is mostly reflecting also the messages from us, from Eurochamber, but also from national chambers of commerce, that there is a lot to do in this area to reduce the time that entrepreneurs spend on filling out paperwork or questionnaires. So definitely that's one of the most important results, and also the year-on-year change is probably the highest compared to other indicators. Lack of skilled workers, also Ludger mentioned it, it's a persistent barrier, a challenge for entrepreneurs. There are several factors influencing this, but definitely the capacity of companies to provide trainings to their employees is something that we should be more careful about and address more consistently. For instance, I was reading that from Eurostat, only 22% of SMEs provide ICT training to their employees, whereas this figure goes up to 73% for large companies. So you see that there is a funding difficulty for smaller companies. So these are the results, and yeah, as I said, overall the framework is rather positive compared to previous editions. Of course, we need to look into addressing certain barriers in the single market. So my bottom line message is indeed that predictability for next year should be a top priority, and also advancing with policy reforms is very crucial at the European level, but also at the national level, to keep up this momentum.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Giacomo. But now I come back with the same question. If you didn't work for Eurochambers, would you consider setting up a business in the EU, and why? What would make a good business case today?
Yeah, thanks, Uti. If I was not working for Eurochambers, I might have been employed in my father's company. So indeed, this is an interesting question, because it's important. There are, at the moment, we have a certain momentum. So if you ask me whether it's a good moment or not, I would say yes, based on certain assumptions. We need to make sure that the policy framework is correct, that we enable companies not only to start, but also to grow, as it was said. And interesting finding from a Eurostat survey that in 2023, we had more companies, more new companies were open in the EU compared to the one that closed. If I'm not mistaken, it was 3.2 million new openings compared to a 2.7 closing or something like that. That's a good indicator that there is a good momentum. So a supportive ecosystem for SMEs needs to be the first step. So that comes from providing good policy for those companies. So yeah, I would say that is a good moment. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And now we move to Brian with the competitiveness barometer of Danish.
I actually just prefer to stand up while I make the presentation. Okay. If that's okay.
Yes, that's okay.
Thank you so much. As you were told, I'm the CEO of the Danish Chamber of Commerce. We represent approximately 18,000 different companies. Some among the biggest in the field, like Novo Nordisk, Vestas, DSV, and so on. But most of our members are SMEs. Actually, 80% of the companies we represent have less than 25 employees. And for my part, I love SMEs. I love startups. I love entrepreneurs. But I don't think in Europe we give SMEs the love they deserve. And that's one of the reasons we are falling behind in Europe right now. Actually, I came back from Silicon Valley 2 days ago, Sunday, where we were visiting some of the biggest American tech companies, Meta, Amazon, Google, Salesforce, and so on. And what made me deeply impressed with their operations was their focus on innovation and technology. But at the same time, it made me depressed to witness how far behind we are in Europe. Because I think I've been visiting most of the European tech companies, and they are falling behind in kind of the spirit and competitiveness when we talk about innovation. Right now, I only see one area where Europe is superior to the US, and that's the numbers of citizens. We are 450 million Europeans, while they are 340 million Americans. But despite our numerical advantages, Europe is behind on almost everything. Take growth, for instance. Growth predictions for next year is...
Click one more.
Yeah, one more, I can see that. Growth predictions for next year is 1.2% in the EU, while the American economy is projected to grow almost double that. And that's in the midst of our trade war. If we look at the 100 most valuable companies in the world, 9 of those are in the EU, while 60 are from the US. And talk about SMEs. Last year, Europe created 16 unicorns, while the US created 34. Now, what causes these numbers? Why are we falling behind? Is it our word ethics? Is it that Europeans, SMEs are not creative enough? No, as they might say in the US, and I'm a former politician, so I know that I'm saying right now very well, is the framework conditions stupid? It is the framework conditions stupid. We have focused in my organizations on Europe's competitiveness for many years, and long before Draghi wrote his report. And in 22, we started making an annual competitiveness barometer, a report that compares the framework conditions between 35 OECD countries. The report is based on data on 75 indicators, and it can be found on our website. And what does the data show? Well, in Europe, we have seen small movements back and forth over the years. One year, one country is better than the other country, and the next, that country is better than the other countries. But looking at the big picture, we see one general trend, and that is that European countries are losing ground to the US. So taking the data from our barometer and others from our analysis, what are the main challenges facing SMEs and our members? Well, when we ask the members about this, their biggest concerns right now are not the orange man in the White House. It's not terrorists. It's not the war, the terrible war in Ukraine where Putin is acting like another Hitler. It is burdens and bureaucracy. Now, my little country, we are a small country, I know, but we are considered quite a productive and efficient society. We are actually very highly digitalized. We have a skilled workforce. But despite this, one of our recent analyses have shown that Danish companies now spend so much time on administration and regulation that it corresponds to 90,000 full-time employees. And that is, I know we're a small country, but that's a lot. That's more than 3% of our total numbers of employees in Denmark. And that's just in the private sector. For large companies, all the paperwork and compliance risk killing their productivity. But for many of our SMEs, it risks killing their businesses entirely. And because of this, many of the growth companies are leaving. Since 2000, Denmark has created 13 unicorns, but 9 of them have moved out to the US. As you know, complex regulation is not just a Danish invention. It's a challenge for the whole European community. As our national bank, the Danish National Bank, recently documented, the internal barriers in the EU are so big that they correspond to a 50% tariffs on goods and a 110% tariffs on services. 50% on goods, 110% tariffs on services. And that's from our Danish National Bank. In other words, who needs a trade war when we already are at war with ourselves? And talking about the US, we can see that American states trade more than double as much with each other as we do in the EU 27. So we need to streamline the single market. It would have great benefits for SMEs and the European economy. As you can see on this slide, just 2.4% more trade between European countries would make up for a 20% decrease in European exports to the US. So what actions must we take from our point of view? First, Europe must shift its focus from compliance to competition. We need to set clear targets for reducing administration and bureaucracy. We cannot afford more missed opportunities like last month, where the European Parliament voted against simplifying the CSRD. So I'm crossing my fingers for the vote tomorrow. Second, as I said earlier, we must have a stronger single market. And we must make sure that it is, in fact, a single market and not 27 different sets of regulation. This will make it easier for SMEs to scale up, and it will make it more attractive for successful startups to stay in Europe. Third, we must do everything we can to make capital and funding more accessible to European companies, large and small. If we simplify regulation and make the single market stronger, then automatically we will see more investment in European companies and SMEs. But we should also make sure that the founding mechanisms in the EU are more accessible to SMEs. For instance, programs like Horizon Europe and Invest EU. It must be much more easier for SMEs to apply for funding without too much paperwork. As I start by saying, my recent visit to the US left me a bit depressed, but because I'm a true European, I've always been a true European. However, I'm an optimist by nature. I still believe that the best days of Europe are ahead of us, but it requires that we take action now to improve the framework condition for SMEs and other countries. So, thank you.
Can you stay for a second?
Yes.
May I still ask you if
you can ask me as many questions as you want.
The first one, because then we give the floor to the audience as well. But despite your depression after coming back from the United States, would you recommend to people here in the room or outside the room to start a business in Denmark or in the EU?
I'm an optimist by nature. Most of you are foreigners, but I was actually elected the Optimist of the Year in Denmark this year. I see the glass half full, not half empty. But I'm also a realist, and I believe in Europe. But what makes me optimistic is that, of course, we have a lot of talents, a lot of skilled people, and so on. But the orange man in the White House has been a wake-up call for Europe. And it leaves us with lots of possibilities for companies in Europe. We have 450 million people in Europe. There are only 340 million people in the US. So we have a bigger market in Europe. We have a better possibility to have good market cooperation with other continents, other countries, because we have such a huge internal market in the EU. So what makes me optimistic for starting a business is that the market is much bigger in Europe, and the potential is much bigger than before, because now it's much easier for Europe to make agreements with other continents and other countries, because they don't want to be dependent on the US. So I'm quite optimistic about starting business in Europe right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all the speakers. You have heard 3 great presentations on 3 very different studies looking at our competitiveness from 3 different angles. Now it's time to open the floor for questions. We have 15 minutes left. Those of you who are following this session online can scan the Slido code, which you should now see on the screen. Those in the room, I see hands raised there. I have 1, then 2 and 3 on the right-hand side and 4 in front. And the 5th one, and then I'm afraid I have to close it with that. So the 2 gentlemen there and the 2 people in the first row. But please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning to everyone. I am. Everyone calls me Nilu. I represent Euro Nordic Funding Alliance. In response to the panel, I have a question. I would like to make a note. I'm originally from the Gulf region. The last 10 years lived in Europe, Norwegian as well, and also lived in Africa. So I believe I can bring a little bit of an input cross-border. I have and I'm a systemic designer, so we like putting pieces together. So what I believe Europe is taking for granted is the incredible resources that you have spent on R&D all these last years. Incredible technologies have been produced that none of them are being commercialized and have been placed into regions that are extremely hungry for that, like Africa. And now when USAID is out of picture, they are very much strong in their mindset to change their attitude from being, donor receiving in Africa and the Gulf and just only depending on the oil money, but they actually want to soft land technologies. And I think that is what Europe can extremely benefit from. For example, we were working on a scheme between the Gulf countries to support the simplest program under European Commission, which is Erasmus+, to help the talents to move. We did not manage to make it because the culture that exists in Europe yet does not exist there. So you may be behind in technology from US or whatever makes us, have to push ourselves to be optimistic, but you actually in your framework have been fantastic at creating unity among your countries. So now the result of that with all this know-how and technology has to be transferred and monetized. This is our job. We have been trying to do that, but we have a big hurdle. For example, we've worked with chambers. Chambers are gatekeepers. They don't share their network. They don't give us access to their SMEs to actually evaluate what their needs are and help them to go abroad. There are various network associations as well. So please open the network, please support. There are many organizations that have the possibility to soft land technologies abroad. I did not ask any questions, I just had remarks, but yeah, sorry for that.
No, thank you. That's very interesting to hear. I suggest that we take 2 more questions. So there were 2 on the right-hand side, and then I ask the panelists who want to react and answer, and then we take the other 2, and then we probably have run out of time. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for sharing the findings of the research. My name's Alan Hutchison. I'm the founder of a European SME in the reimbursed healthcare market, so prosthetics provision. My son is actually talking this afternoon at one of the sessions. Our biggest challenge that we have faced, and I was looking closely for the issues, is actually the resistance to change from the incumbents in Europe in the industry that we're in. Cheaper, faster, better is not of interest for them because the reimbursement system is so inefficient, they're making lots of money. Their strategy is either copy or buy and kill. This has forced us, we won the Toyota Startup Award, we're working with Toyota, we're working with Murata, so we went to Japan. We would love to do this in Europe, but we can't because of the anti-competitive behavior of the incumbents. And I think that really has to be addressed and should be included also in the research because I see it prolific. I do consulting work in many sectors. I see it prolific and anti-competitive behavior against innovators. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Igor Kalinc. I work for the European Commission. So my question will be for the Eurochamber and the Danish Chamber of Commerce. So it's more a reflection. It's not really my point, but there are 2 challenges. On one side, we have the lack of competitiveness in Europe, but on the other side, the social challenge is that we can continue seeing the gap between poor and rich stronger and stronger. On the other side, the other reflection is that Europe has been built on traditional, what yesterday was called everyday enterprises. That was our really competitive thing that allowed us to be social, especially in Scandinavian countries, but also competitive. And nowadays, it seems that we want to regain competitiveness by chasing the American model without having the American society or background or framework. So maybe why we don't, okay, we keep startups and gazelles in mind, but what also Frederica was saying yesterday, we don't really focus on those traditional SMEs that do not necessarily want to grow too much or to be gazelles, that actually a gazelle is made to be run and to look for simpler frameworks and where they can make more money and pay less taxes, which is kind of not possible in Europe with our framework, with social, everything that we have here.
Thank
Good luck
you
answering.
very much. So now indeed, these were rather comments than questions, but certainly provoked thoughts in the panel. So who wants to start?
Maybe I can have a go. Maybe the first two questions very quickly. I think it's a very astute observation that actually Europe per se does not have a problem in coming up with innovative solutions and innovative entrepreneurs. Actually, if you go back in time, like 10, 15 years ago, there was already the Commission launched a first sort of startup scale-up initiative. And there the focus was really also in boosting the startup environment. But now the focus has shifted. We can see, if you look at startup activity, Europe is pretty much on par with the US. Yeah? And so a lot has been happening there. But where we have failed to make inroads is getting those startups, turning enough of them into scale-ups. It was part of also was I referring to. And there we have to ask why is that the case? Why? And you know, of course, money talks, and there's, you know, whenever something, you have a promising firm that is on the cusp of being a unicorn, it was mentioned, then of course there are a lot of firms in the US who have simply deeper pockets to say, okay, well, you know, let's, you know, that we'll just pay them out of our kind of pocket money more, so to speak. But I think it's not just the lack of capital markets, competitive capital markets, but it's also this issue of having these, properly integrating these innovative firms in the overall environment, meaning that, and I think we are discussing this now with our developing our new startup scale-up strategy as a commission, is what does it take to get more innovative firms going? Part is, of course, specialized instruments to financial instruments and so on to put them in place, yes. But it's also, I think we don't, and that's, I think, certainly our DG Grow perspective here, those innovative firms like the one you mentioned, they have to sell to others. They have to have clients, you know. Just because giving them a lot of money will not make them grow. They grow by selling their stuff. And therefore you need also an environment of not just a small sliver of high-tech, deep-tech firms, but they are dependent on a dynamic business environment of firms that also grow fast. And because growing fast always means transforming. You're changing, you're interested in new business ideas, and then you're more interested in taking new ideas. So that's indeed, we're lacking. We have to embed this sort of focus on startup scale-ups in a broader push for more business dynamism across the board, I would say. And
no.
yeah.
Yes, indeed, looking at the timing. So may I suggest that we take the remaining two questions and then I give the floor to you and you choose how you want to react. So please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Julianne Marie Nyandam, and I'm one of the Danish EEC, European Economic and Social Committee members, Danish member in the EU. I'm also on the board of the Engineering Association in Denmark and president of Female Entrepreneurs. I have two questions. For the middle panel, you were displaying your research that was conducted over 28 countries. We only have 27 in the EU, so which one is the 28? And then for Brian, since we are in Denmark, and I'm an optimist just like you are, could you tell us what is something that Danish SMEs are doing well in the EU, and what kind of things that we are doing well could the rest of the EU benefit from doing too? Thank you.
Interesting. So, the last question.
Thank you. I'm a lobbyist paid for complaining for small medium-sized enterprises, and you made me a little bit unsecure with your data. Thanks anyway for your work. But the point is, we see very negative signs from our membership about the situation of economy, not only the bureaucratic burden, but you have quite positive numbers. Very interesting. And how do you explain this? Is that only, let's say, depression, so we need more optimism? Or is it really in the fact, for example, you in your data on 2024, you were not analyzing the mid-caps, for example, the small mid-caps, maybe because they are not officially yet a category. And you were also not analyzing the energy costs, which we hear continuously is a big problem. How do you explain that?
Okay, so now unfortunately I have to close the questions. We also have 2 questions via Slido, but we are running out of time. So Giacomo and Brian, who wants to speak first? Okay.
Good.
Brian,
Maybe,
let's start with
I don't care. Okay. I'm not paid to complain, but I actually agree with you. And I'm the optimist in the room. Because looking at all the numbers and looking at the questions here, I actually feel I'm in a fairy tale by, you're in the country of Hans Christian Andersen. We are born with reading his fairy tales. You are not, but they're very good. One of them is called A Boy and the Emperor's New Clothes. And the boy attends a ceremony where the king is celebrated. He walks through the streets. Everybody was saying, yes, what a great king we have. But the boy says to his parents, the king has no clothes on. And I feel a little bit like that, sorry, even though I'm the optimist. I'm not paid for saying this. Because what really matters for SMEs is the framework conditions. It's not all the things you were asking about from the European Commission, because we have a different system in Europe. But what really matters for the European SMEs is the bureaucracy, is the framework conditions, is the taxes, it is the energy prices, it is that we have a free and internal market. That's what matters for SMEs. That's really what matters for SMEs. And that's why we are lagging behind. But what makes me optimistic, and that, going back to your question, my fellow Dane, is that we have so many talented SMEs with so many good products, and the problem is the scale of it, as we were just talking up here. So if we find a solution for that, I think there's really good times ahead of Europe, because what we have specialized in Denmark is, of course, in the green technology, biosolutions, pharma, and so on. We're a small country. But Europe could front it all. But we just need to find out to have better framework conditions and how to put the capital in the framework conditions. So by that note, I'm both pessimist, but I'm also optimist.
Thank you very much, Giacomo.
Yes, thanks, Uti. And very briefly, I will try to answer some of the questions. First question, the 28 countries. We as Eurochamber, we do not only represent European Union countries, but also we have Ukraine in our membership. We have Turkey. So some of those countries definitely also took part in the survey. But if you, for the full list of the participating countries, of course, we published, I forgot to say that we published the report today. It should be on our website, so you can go check it out. Regarding the question on how comes that we are so positive, we are not that positive. I would be careful with saying that. We are saying that the situation is less negative than last year. That's a different way of seeing it. And I fully agree with you that energy costs is one of the top challenges that we definitely influenced the results that we registered this year. Another comment on the importance of feeding the local ecosystems. I think I fully agree with you. Also, yesterday's Schumpeter lecture was actually an eye-opener indeed, because I fully support the fact that we should not focus only on these fast-moving, fast-developing companies. Of course, these are critical for our competitiveness, especially if you compare us to the US, China. But what really makes the most impact in terms of GDP itself in Europe is the remaining companies that are actually operating, most of them at the local and regional level. So I fully agree that, and with the speaker from yesterday's lecture, when she said that actually the difference between a fast-moving company and a company which is well established into the national territory is that the local company who is established there since 10, 20 years actually knows the stakeholders that they have around. So they know the territory, they know how to manage the network. So instead, faster companies, sometimes they run out of steam quite fast, quite soon. Yes, just wanted to say this, and I think I don't have any other comments. Just one last point, Uti, if you allow me, that also considering your question and how to support these companies who operate at the local level, a big issue that Europe is facing is the demographic change, this demographic shift that we are actually in, and we see that there are hundreds of thousands of companies which every day close down. Why? Because they don't have anyone to pass the company to. So the Commission right now is working on this new recommendation on the transfer of business to the next generation, and we strongly encourage the Commission to move forward with it. And we hope that indeed the comments from the Commission will be taken up by member states, who are the ones who actually need to provide these framework conditions. Last week, we had the European Parliament of Enterprises, where we basically put 700 entrepreneurs into the hemicycle of the European Parliament, and we asked them to debate and vote on some questions. And one of the questions was on how integrated is the single market. And 88% of the entrepreneurs said that it's not integrated enough. That doesn't allow them to move freely, to commercialize their products, to scale in Europe. And that's, of course, that's one of the reasons why then we see that the US is on top of the rankings of China and so on. So we need to first make sure that the policy framework, the policy conditions in the EU are actually right in order to allow the companies to scale.
Thank you very much. It has been a very interesting discussion. We could have gone on for much longer. What I take from this is indeed careful optimism, or as you put it, Giacomo, less negative than last year. We have seen years of rather depressive presentations of challenges. Now the optimism in the room has referred to our single market. We can create more markets and more demand here if there are further difficulties in trade with the United States. We have things which maybe we take for granted, our research bases, our Erasmus and other programs. But immediately when I ask the question on is there a business case in the EU, we jump into policies, regulatory burdens, lack of competition. So if the question is why are the results less bad than one would expect, maybe we need a full room full of optimists of the year. So thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much to the audience. And indeed, all the studies are available on the websites of the three institutions that you have seen here on the stage. So thank you very much.
Okay.